What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with another 2024-2025 NBA season look ahead. We are on to the Memphis Grizzlies, which means I got to speak with Keith Parrish of the Fast Break Breakfast podcast, as well as the Grits and Grinds podcast, which covers the Memphis Grizzlies specifically, and Fast Break Breakfast covers the entire league. Follow Keith on Twitter. The handle will be on the screen in the YouTube and podcast description as well. At Fast Break Break, though, spelled exactly as it sounds. We get into all things Grizzlies. The one quick note, we did record this right before, it was like a couple hours after we wrapped recording. We got the news about Gigi Jackson's broken foot and needing to have surgery. So that's not included in our analysis. So apply it as you will. It doesn't change a ton. It changes a ton for the Grizzlies. And the impact of that is going to be pretty significant, just because when you look at this team, they're kind of light on those wing type of players. I think this will increase, even though he's smaller, the importance of Vince Williams Jr. But we talk a ton about Vince Williams Jr. as well as Gigi Jackson. So I still think you really enjoy the episode. And just a quick reminder, if you are new around these parts, please remember to subscribe. We cover the entire league. And we do these podcasts to make sure that we give at least, ample time to every single team once a year. But we do these exercises where we talk about every team throughout the year and hit some of the trending topics. So we do a pretty damn good job, Grant and myself over here. So if you're new, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Ratings and reviews help us out a ton on Apple. Please consider commenting and liking on the videos, even if you're listening to audio, to help the algorithm love us back. If you've done all of those things, consider joining our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. And if you would like to support the show, word of mouth recommendations go a long way. Shout us out on social media. Let us know if you have decided to shout us out anywhere, or if you've convinced to subscribe. I will send you, if you tell me, I'll send you a HardwoodKnocks magnet mailed to your address. You tell me that you've converted someone to being a HardwoodKnocks listener. Get at us in the comments via email, via our Discord. My DMs, I think, are open on Twitter/X. I actually can't remember now that I'm thinking about it. So tell me that there. And if you want to support the show, please consider check out our merch store. I'm wearing a Sicko shirt right now. We've got ones where it's kind of simplistic on the front with the logos, and then there's big stuff on the back and vice versa. So that's enough out of me, though. This is a little bit longer of an intro than normal, just because I have to do the Gigi Jackson note. Bummer for him, bummer for the Grizzlies, who can't seem to escape the injury bug. But let's get to talking more about the Grizzlies in detail with Keith Parrish of Grits and Grinds and Fast Break Breakfast. Keith, welcome back. Thank you so much again for coming on this year for our Memphis Grizzlies look ahead. Always a great time. The most important question, though, how the heck are you doing, man?
I am doing fantastic, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's always fun coming on HardwoodKnocks talking about my favorite team.
Well, this team is interesting for me because I feel like, with the exception of whenever we talk about the Bulls on this podcast with a local expert, they don't tend to ether their teams for what happened over the offseason. And I won't use the word ether for what you said, but I found your impressions of the Grizzlies offseason fascinating, to where when you went through, you graded it for the Grits and Grinds podcast. It was marked by basically relative inaction, aside from tax ducking and getting Zach Edey, which I guess makes sense in a nutshell because we have so little information on what this core was supposed to be with Marcus Smart. But just what did you make of kind of the decision to not make a ton of changes this year or be super aggressive during the offseason?
Well, the difference between me and, like, I'd say a Bulls podcaster, like, the Bulls podcasters have legitimate grievances. I have, let's call them first world problems, like the Grizzlies are good, and the Grizzlies are well run, and the Grizzlies have a competent front office. The Grizzlies win basketball games. So I wouldn't call it an ethering. I just have some mild criticisms about a trend that's been occurring for the Grizzlies. It's been occurring since they broke through in 2022. That team that was the We Here Grizzlies, where, Ja was amazing, and like Desmond Bane had the breakout, and then you had like an awesome bench. They won 56 games that year, lost in the second round to the Warriors in a very, very close series. The Grizzlies had the lead in the fourth quarter of 3 of their 4 losses. They were ahead in the final 2 minutes of 2 of the 4 losses. Morant got hurt. Steven Adams had COVID. Desmond Bane was hospitalized for a back thing. So we were on the precipice in our minds of greatness several years ago. We were basically this year's Thunder, where everyone's like, whoa, the Thunder are so young. They have their whole future ahead of us. So I'm now in, like, jaded a few years later, where things have not gone perfectly for the Grizzlies since then. And there hasn't been like one huge like mistake, I think, for the front office or anything. I think there were some questions asked by me and others about like the decision to let some of the valuable veterans go after that 2022 season and then turn over to youth. They drafted a bunch of young guys. And then since then, they've dealt with things. They had injuries, massive Steven Adams and Brandon Clark injuries, and then Ja Morant's off-court stuff, Ja Morant getting suspended, then Ja Morant getting hurt. Last year's a total wash. They lose a bunch of games. So that being said, my worrisome trend that I keep mentioning, it's like, hey, we continually, in my mind, don't maximize the roster around our three best players, those being Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, they did go out and get Marcus Smart last summer, thinking, all right, we made a mistake not being aggressive, but also that move, while it was pitched that way, was actually a replacement of other valuable players in Dylan Brooks and Tyus Jones. And so I kept being like, I feel like I keep getting this storyline fed to me, and I don't know who's doing it. Maybe I'm just listening to other Grizzlies analysts, but they're like, oh yeah, we got this guy. And I'm like, yeah, but we lost these guys. Those seem like sideways moves. So jump all the way ahead to this offseason. Going into the offseason, I think the request of everyone who followed the Grizzlies, or the expectation for everyone who followed the Grizzlies, was, all right, we need a starting center. We made a decision that we can't wait on Steven Adams to get healthy. Let's go ahead and move him for a couple second-round picks. We need a center, and then we need more size and shooting. Even when our team's fully healthy, I don't think we have enough size and enough shooting. And there were a lot of avenues open to the Grizzlies, and many of them, if not most of them, would take the Grizzlies into the luxury tax. For the first time since like the core four big grit and grind era, it's like, all right, it's time to pay the tax. Finally, all the extensions have kicked in for Bane and Jaren and Ja. We've paid to keep some guys. We have Marcus Smart. Now to build on this team, finally, the Grizzlies are going to dip their toe into the luxury tax line. And this offseason, which you said I sort of ethered, they drafted Zach Edey. They salary dumped Zaire Williams. They have an open roster spot as we record at the end of August. They have an open roster spot because of luxury tax concerns. So this offseason, they tried to fix their problems through the draft, which is, it's risky. I mean, I'm excited about Zach Edey. I think he could be awesome for the Grizzlies. But when I just graded the offseason, what did they do this offseason? They used their draft picks. They have fewer playable NBA players right now than they did last year when they started the season. Of course, during the season, they had almost no playable NBA players because everyone got hurt. But that's why this offseason, I'm like, I think the Grizzlies are going to be good. But if you ask me to grade the offseason, I mean, they didn't do anything. They drafted some guys. They used roster spots on rookies. We have Jalen Wells and Zach Edey. I'm not saying Zaire Williams is good, but I think he's going to be in the NBA in a couple of seasons. And as opposed to nothing, I'd rather have Zaire Williams. But right now, the Grizzlies sit under the tax. That was my very long monologue on why I'm not thrilled with the offseason, even though I am very excited about the team.
Very quickly, I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me about Zaire Williams, that you think he's going to be in the league in a couple of years. So that's a big, big
is he not? I don't know. I was looking at the Nets roster and I'm like, is Zaire even going to play? I don't know. I think Zaire Williams is an NBA player, but who knows? Maybe not.
So I've been asking people to open things up. What's their biggest storyline that they're tracking for their team leading into next season? And I pride myself on kind of knowing what the answer is going to be for most of these teams from my guess. I have zero idea what you're about to tell me. I feel like I could maybe guess, but there's like 3 to 5 things that I could, if I was to just ask this, like answer it myself. So what is your biggest storyline that you're monitoring for this team entering next year? Like, it could be just the health. It could be the fit of Zach Edey. We really haven't seen the fit of Marcus Smart with everyone. There's just so many different directions to go.
I think the biggest storyline is pretty simple. This is keep the main thing. The biggest storyline is Ja Morant back. Like, if Ja Morant is just that guy, we briefly saw it last year. I mean, it was almost a storybook last year when he first came back. He missed the first 25 games. The Grizzlies were 6-19 in his first game back. The first game Ja Morant played last year, he hit a buzzer beater to beat the Pelicans. He had 34 points. They rallied from 24 down. He hits a shot at the buzzer to win. They win their first 4 games with Ja Morant, and it's like, whoa, we're back. But then after 9 games, he gets injured, out for the season. He won Western Conference Player of the Week the first week he played last year. So it looked like Ja Morant was back last season, but we only got 9 games. So the main issue for the Grizzlies is Ja Morant going to come back and be the all-NBA caliber player that he was beforehand. There's no reason he shouldn't be. Still very, very young, still very, very good. But it seems like the whole league has forgotten about Ja Morant. And I listen to a lot of preview podcasts. I read stuff. I see like the player rankings, and I never get upset about a player ranking. I know they're for entertainment, but my eyebrow did go up very, very high when it's like Ja Morant's the 30th best player in the NBA. Like based on what? I've seen that multiple, like that ballpark where I'm like, the guy is a 30 point per game scorer. The guy can't be guarded. The guy's a great passer, and the guy has won. He's won consistently. It's weird where people draw in the off the court stuff talking about Ja, and I don't know what it is. And they say things about him. They describe his game as like, doesn't play a winning style. And I don't think I'm fighting a straw man here. Like I see people saying stuff and I'm like, he's won. He's won his entire career. They were supposed to be awful his rookie season, and they were competitive and good. They would have made the playoffs if they hadn't come up with the fictitious bubble tournament thing where you had to qualify for the playoffs. In the middle of the season, Dan, they changed the rules for the playoffs.
They did it to impede Ja Morant.
They did it to give Zion Williamson a chance of making the playoffs. I can't believe the league presidents or the whoever's involved signed off on it. If I was in a fantasy league and you changed the rules halfway through to keep my team out, no, Ja Morant's won. Ja Morant in the playoffs has been amazing. He's even stepped up his level of play in the playoffs. So the biggest storyline for the Grizzlies is basically, is Ja Morant going to play 70 games and reclaim, I think, his rightful place as being one of the top 15 players in the league?
Is there like because he's still only 25, he's super young.
Yeah.
Is the next step for him still just like, hey, he hasn't shot 35% on spot up 3 since his rookie year. Let's just have that happen, because the volume is like kind of there. I mean, I know last year he didn't play a ton, but like when you look at kind of the trajectory of the 3-point attempts, like, okay, I'm okay with the volume. Now, if those things could fall, and I'm not asking him to hit all these like complicated step backs, but that just kind of feels like offensively the last frontier for him.
Yeah, there's some formula for how good the Grizzlies are going to win next year. There's some like fake formula that I'm going to make up. It's some combination of Ja Morant games played times Ja Morant 3-point percentage. Like if Ja Morant, maybe include Gigi Jackson in there too. Like if Ja and Gigi can make like 34% of their 3-pointers and also be healthy and play, the Grizzlies are going to win a lot of games in the regular season. If Ja shoots 32% from 3, it's going to be a little bit harder. So yeah, I think still that jump shot, if he could add that, just get to the De'Aaron Fox level of knocking down a few more jumpers. That's going to help his game, I think, tremendously. Maybe the other thing you always ask about his defense, although Ja he's been a part of really good defensive teams. So I think he can do enough there to not be a total just sieve and allow everyone to penetrate past him. I do think, maybe the final level for Ja Morant's game is just consistently being able to hit 3-pointers. We're not asking for the world. 34% would be great.
Do you think, so looking at last year, I know Desmond Bane was kind of already headed down this path, but like the extra just self-creation or the extra layer of difficulty assigned to both him and Jaren Jackson Jr. on offense, do you, from what you saw from them last season, and even like kind of Jaren Jackson Jr. specifically, like you even just look at his, his ISO percentage, like basically like tripled in terms of volume last year. Do you find that as something that will be valuable in the larger context of this healthy team? Like, okay, now the Grizzlies are healthy, but Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane have explored different depths of their game, not just because of the Ja Morant injury, but like, I mean, Bane was injured at points, so that shifts onus onto Jackson Jr. We know Marcus Smart missed a ton of time. Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. It should help them tremendously. The big question for the Grizzlies going into the last 2 seasons was the half-court offense. And a lot of this stuff was like, all right, we figured out the regular season. 2 years in a row, the Grizzlies were second in the West. But the question was, but how do we advance further in the playoffs? And you would look to maybe our formula of winning based on forcing turnovers and getting offensive rebounds is not sustainable when the game slows down in the postseason. So they spent a lot of energy trying to come up with ways to be better in the half court. They struck out, I think, a few of them. Like, one of the reasons they let like Kyle Anderson go is because his shot looks funny, and they weren't sure that was the best option for the postseason. So they brought in guys whose shots were more pretty, who ended up being much worse players. But I think they keep thinking we have to fix the half-court offense. And I think one of the silver linings to last season, besides getting the 9th pick and getting Zach Edey, one of the silver linings is Jaren Jackson Jr. got so many reps creating his own shot. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s points per isolation was incredible last year. And
he was above a point per ISO, right?
Yeah, it was one of the best in the league. I mean, that's your, I believe, purview. It's not me, Dan. This is the NBA math. You tell me the numbers. I'll just repeat them. But the
he averaged 2.2 points per ISO possession, Keith. 2.2.
Now we're talking. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I heard it was over 4, but that's fine. Jaren creating his own shot, I think that should help them greatly. Desmond Bane also, like, he averaged like 24 points per game basically, and also became more of a creator. I mean, one of the things, maybe we'll get to it, like Marcus Smart didn't really work that well as like we thought. Well, we thought he would work well as a point. Like, the idea was like, oh, he'll replace Dylan Brooks in the starting lineup, but also replace Tyus Jones as a backup point guard. He was not good as a facilitator, but all of a sudden Desmond Bane was like, hey, Desmond Bane is a pretty good point guard or combo guard, for the lack of a better term. Like, he was a good facilitator. So the hope is a lot of those half-court concerns that are going to be a problem maybe when you get to the playoffs, those are going to be fixed by having more and more guys who can create their own shot when there's 5 seconds left on the shot clock. It's not going to be just Ja Morant, please bail us out, or just get it up on the rim, maybe we'll grab the rebound. Ja and Desmond and Jaren all should be able to create for themselves. And I think that's just going to make it so much easier as far as scoring for this team when you get those huge clutch possessions, end of games, and in the postseason.
I think maybe even Gigi Jackson will take it upon himself to soak up some of those reps.
I mean, Gigi Jackson is a big question mark. He absolutely is one of the best guys on the team at creating his own shot. Whether or not it's a good shot, who knows? I doubt he's going to be on the court in those pressure situations. He's not like going to be part of the closing 5 or anything, but I think eventually, we do hope that will be yet another avenue, another outlet for a guy who can get you points, when the shot clock's running down.
So are we able to take anything away from the Marcus Smart experience last year? Again, and just to reiterate, I'm sure anyone who listens to your podcast knows the 4 players that we're all interested in played 238 possessions together last year. Ja, Jaren, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane. So like, there's nothing to take away from that. And Marcus Smart had like kind of absurd shot making by his standards inside the arc. Didn't shoot too well from 3, but I kept coming back to the turnovers, just on the drives, in the pick and rolls. How big of a concern is that versus, well, that's just a function of look at what he was playing within last year?
I thought, okay, I'm trying to remember back. There weren't that many games, Dan. Let's see. I think he played 20 games. So you mentioned the turnovers. That was one of the things where I remember, like, as a fan, you want to feel good about your team. And maybe sometimes when you feel like you feel somebody's criticizing your team, you naturally want to push back. But one of the things I remember last year being like, look at Marcus Smart's shooting percentages and his turnovers. That's absurd. Like, the number of turnovers he has is outrageous. His shooting percentage, his 3-point percentage. I mean, he's not a good 3-point shooter, but this was still on the lower level of his career numbers. Again, only 20 games, so it's a small sample size. He did steal the ball a pretty good amount. I think it was 2 steals per game. But going back to your main question, I don't know if we can take that much from it. It looked bad. The look of him playing with Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., the Grizzlies were bad. Like, the Grizzlies last year were basically the worst offense in the NBA the entire year. And when you look at the season total, you say, well, yes, they missed all their players. Desmond Bane only played half the season. Ja missed the whole season. Marcus missed 3/4 of the season. But if you look at the first 20 games, first 15 games, when Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and Marcus Smart were all there. And we thought the Grizzlies were going to be competitive during those 25 games when Ja was out. The offense was last in the NBA during those games too. So like it was a hard watch. Now maybe it was just a slow acclimation process because the last few games that Marcus played, it got better. And it's hard to remember because the season was so bad. But Marcus's last 3 games, the Grizzlies were on a road trip. They beat the Lakers. They beat the Suns. They beat the Mavericks. And all those teams played all their guys. This wasn't a situation where they were like resting players. No. The Grizzlies with Ja Morant blew out the Lakers. And then Ja Morant got hurt. That was his last game of the year. The next 2 games, they beat the Suns. They beat the Mavs. Marcus Smart's playing great. Vince Williams Jr. has emerged, been a big part of the lineup. So they started winning. So maybe you can say it was starting to come together. But I think overall conclusion, no, it's hard to draw any firm conclusions about what Marcus did last year.
So it's fair to then still be hopeful about like what his fit will be on this team then. I feel like it would be unfair to say it's not great, but I do feel like the whole theory of, I will say based off what I saw from Marcus Smart last season, and he played whatever it was, 20 games. I did not see all 20 of those games. I've watched possessions for most of them. It puts more pressure on Desmond Bane to like be that type of playmaker. And you do have Vince Williams, like see how he factors in. Derrick Rose is still floating around on this team, right? He's still on their payroll, but I feel less confident in Marcus Smart. And I never felt too confident because the turnover stuff was an issue in Boston, by the way. And they had a good team. Like he wasn't dealing, like they were healthy a lot of the times while he was there. So I think I'm less sold than ever on the idea that Marcus Smart can come in and kind of steward the offense in some of their secondary lineups. And that's probably the thing with him I'll be watching most closely. And not just in the sense of can he do it? How much of an opportunity are they going to even give him to do it at this point?
Yeah, I think the big question is still how he's going to fit once Ja Morant is there. We only got a handful of games, with Ja, Dez, Marcus, and Jaren. And the thing I keep saying, like one of my thoughts that I had that I keep repeating now is like, if Marcus is playing with the other presumed best players in Zach Edey, like you basically don't want Marcus Smart to shoot. Any Marcus Smart shot is a shot that Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., or Zach Edey aren't shooting. And those 4 guys are way more efficient at scoring. So I think one of the big question marks for the Grizzlies, like those are probably the presumed starters. I've been saying for like 9 months now that Vince Williams Jr. should be the starter because Vince does not shoot unless he's absolutely wide open. Unless he's dunking or wide open from 3, Vince is not going to shoot. So I think it does maybe make more sense to have a lower usage defender, rebounder guy in there, and then maybe some second unit stuff. Marcus, let it fly, brother. And then you can close games with Marcus. I mean, Marcus, he is a winner, and he makes those winning plays.
Unlike Ja Morant, right?
Ja Morant's a selfish guy. Man, 9 assists per game. Selfish. Marcus Smart, he's going to come up with the loose ball. He's going to make the charge. He's going to block a shot, get a steal. He's even going to hit a clutch 3 probably. And so, like, I'm fine with closing with Marcus. But right now, the question is, like, how does it fit when everybody's healthy? And you mentioned it, like, is there still hope? Yeah, I think there is still hope that's going to be the big thing. Also, it better be because he did nothing this offseason, Dan. Joking aside, this offseason is, I think, maybe – it's generously explained. If you don't just think they're trying to avoid paying the luxury tax, it's generously explained by saying, no. They want to see what they have because they didn't get to. This is a reaffirmation of the previous offseason where we traded for Marcus Smart. So let's see what we have before we make any kind of big aggressive upgrade on the wing or we trade away any future picks or anything. Let's see what it looks like with Marcus alongside Ja, Jaren, and Dez.
I mean, didn't have to be a big. They could have at least used their mid-level exception. That would have.
We don't do that in Memphis.
We've gone almost 22 minutes without talking about Zach Edey, which is either terrible or fantastic podcasting. I don't know which. I have many questions about him, but the first one is, what do you think is going to be most noticeable, or what are you most excited to watch about his impact on this team, and why is it Instagram hype videos with Ja Morant?
I mean, I don't know why it's Instagram hype videos. I mean, I do. People are just excited about new guys. I'm excited about Zach Edey internet phenomenon. It seems like he has tons of fans. And I got to say, man, he drives traffic. So definitely when you're advertising this show, you need to use some Zach Edey art. I mean, I guess it's just you play college that long. I mean, he's a college basketball player that I knew of and knew what he looked like. To break through to my total ignorance of college basketball, the guy had to be a big deal. But what does he bring besides height, which is not to be underrated? The Grizzlies need height. He brings, hopefully, unbelievable screening, which is going to be, I think, very key to getting these downhill lanes for Ja Morant and Desmond Bane to get back to the basket. The Grizzlies, I think, are going to be one of the top paint scoring teams again after they were not.
I'm sure teams have this data available, but I want a stat of like how much space is like generated by these screens to like the runway it opens up, because Zach Edey will fucking probably set the record for that, or at least be in the top 5 this year.
Yeah, that first Summer League game he played, I think they're playing the Jazz in the Salt Lake City Summer League. Everyone was like hyping up. He blocked a shot, or like he dunked on Walker Kessler. That's fine. But one of the first plays, he set a screen for Scottie Pippen Jr., and Scottie Pippen Jr. had like 9 yards of space in front of him. Like it was I was like, I don't know, screen, space generated screen assist, something, come up with an acronym. But yeah, I think the like the screens that even Steven Adams was great at, the ones where you spread your legs a little bit too far, but they don't call it. Like Zach Edey is so big, he's going to free up everybody so much. And then beyond that, just his size and rebounding inside, the way he was just pushing guys all around. We only saw him play like 1 1/3 Summer League games, but the way he boxed out, it was Brook Lopez-ian and it was Steven Adams. Just moved. Like guys can't get around him. Like they had no hope of getting around him. So the rebounding, the screening, and then I think he's not going to get double teamed ever. He should be able to put the ball in the basket pretty easily. I think a lot. I think it's going to be a big mismatch for teams on the offensive end. So I think all of that stuff is really going to unlock a lot of things for the Grizzlies.
Is there, when you look at some of his limitations, what would be your biggest concern about leaning on him, to play such a significant role as a rookie?
I think the only one, and I'm not an expert on any of the draft guys yet. Like I said, I don't know any of the college players unless they're Zach Edey or they're that famous. The defensive issue on if he has to guard, a perimeter player, if he gets switched out, you assume that he's going to play constantly and drop and not actually get switched on to anybody in the perimeter. Like, what's that going to look like? How much of a scramble mode is that going to put the Grizzlies into and put them at disadvantages? Is he going to be able to, guard a guy like Brook Lopez who just stands on the perimeter? Like, are you going to lose some stuff there? But I have very few concerns about it. Like, I think it's going to be totally fine, especially when you consider the rest of the Grizzlies players. They're very good at defense. You have Jaren Jackson Jr. freed up to be more of the roamer he was the year he won Defensive Player of the Year. You have Marcus Smart, even if he's lost a step, very good defender. Vince Williams Jr. is a great defender. This was a team last year that was in the top 10 in defense, despite having none of their regular players. They lost their grip on that in the final few weeks of the season. But like, this team has been good at defense every year under Taylor Jenkins. I think they have enough players to make up for that, for whatever limitations Zach Edey might have on the perimeter. But then in the paint, he's going to be this huge deterrent. And also, I think his rebounding, ending the possession with the defensive rebound, he's going to boost a lot there. So because of that, I have maybe not that many concerns, about maybe issues he has guarding ball handlers and having to go out on the perimeter.
It's funny that I share the non-concern with you, because I felt so much differently about Donovan Clingan in Portland, and then he kind of sold me in Summer League. But with Zach Edey, look at the personnel around the Grizzlies, and I feel like they just have Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, Vince Williams, if he's on the floor. Like, they have the guys where if you need to bring Zach Edey out, like, I wouldn't even call it scramble mode. Like, they're just going to be smarter with their rotations and disciplined enough where do I want to see like Zach Edey like coming all the way out and guarding above the free throw line all the time? No, but like, we've seen him do it a little bit, and they have the personnel to insulate him when teams try to force him to do that. And so I find myself, I think, higher on his fit than I feel like I really should be for a team that is this good and they're leaning on a player who's so new, which I guess kind of leads me to my next question is, like, he's just going to play a huge role for them right out of the gate.
Yeah, I would think so. I would guess that he starts. As far as the number of minutes he plays, I think that's a big question mark. They didn't even play Steven Adams that many minutes. They didn't even play before him. Jonas Valanciunas didn't play that many minutes. I'm curious if they play him more than like 24 minutes a game. I would guess it's going to be somewhere in that 20 to 24 minutes a game. I know at Purdue, he was very healthy and he played a ton of minutes for that basketball team. I don't think they're going to lean that hard on him. Also, the Grizzlies typically keep their minutes low for their team. They just spread out the playing time. They normally play 10 guys every game, but
they normally win enough to where that's not a problem during the regular season too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also think organizationally, it's just part of their belief that, hey, we're going to play 10 deep the whole season. We're going to give these guys experience early, even if there are growing pains, so they're ready to contribute down the line. And I think it's paid off for them in a lot of the guys who have developed under their watch. But yeah, I think he's going to be asked to start. And one of the questions, if you have a question about the Grizzlies, or a concern, I think it is, what happens in games he doesn't play? Like with Edey, same situation. What happens in games that Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't play? The big man rotation. There are competent players on the roster. Brandon Clark coming off the Achilles injury. He played a few games last year. If he can return to form totally, that's a guy you depend on and like. But also, I don't think he can play alongside Zach Edey unless Edey actually makes 3-pointers like he was doing in some of these workout clips. Brandon Clark, maybe not an awesome fit alongside Edey, and then Santi Aldama. This is the last year of Santi Aldama's rookie deal. A lot of question marks about him. And the question for the Grizzlies is going to be in games that Jaren misses or that Zach misses, or even when those guys are off the court.
Yeah.
What's the big man rotation going to be like, and how effective will it be?
That was actually how do you, is it just, we're going to I guess Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to play more minutes than Zach Edey, but is this going to be a situation where, okay, Zach Edey's off the court, so we see Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama? Is it going to be more of a hockey, like we're going to see Brandon Clark and Santi Aldama? Are we just going to see GG slide up to the 4 next to Jaren Jackson Jr.? Like, if you had to guess, or if you were running this team, how do you manage those secondary frontline minutes? I
think their priority is going to be to get a lot of Jaren and Brandon front court minutes together. That's always been an incredible pairing for the Grizzlies historically. Just outrageous 2-man net rating for those guys. It feels like it's always like plus 15 per 100 possessions or plus 17, most years. So I think that's what they're going to normally close with. And I think that's what they're going to focus on. The issue again comes up with what happens when Jaren doesn't play. Every lineup, every big man combination works with Jaren Jackson Jr. That's one of the great compliments of Jaren. Jaren's awesome. He's a fantastic player. He's a good defender. Whatever criticisms people have about his rebounding, it's get over it. No one said, why isn't Andre Karolinko a better rebounder? I don't remember it. No one said it back then. No. But
it wasn't exposed. He didn't play for Team USA.
That's right. That's right. I didn't see Joel Embiid owning the glass in the Olympics. Anyways, what happens when Jaren comes off? And that is the huge question mark. I do think they will try to, they'll start Edey, start Jaren. One of them will come off. If Brandon comes off, if Jaren comes off first, then I think Santi's the guy to play alongside, Edey. But if it's the other ways, I just think you're focused on Jaren with Santi, Jaren with Brandon, and then it still's a question mark. And that's one of the issues maybe I have with the roster. It's still it feels one big short or one useful big. I know they signed Jay Huff, who was awesome in Summer League. I believe he's a 27-year-old guy on a 2-way. Maybe Jay Huff is the answer. But it did seem all right, if Jaren's in foul trouble or if Edey and Jaren miss some games, it's a question mark. Maybe they do. They size down with Gigi at the 4, Jake LaRavia at the 4, Vince Williams Jr. or Marcus Smart at the 4. And that goes back to the overall lack of size for this team. Outside of Gigi Jackson, there aren't wings with size, really. And it seems like the NBA, the good teams, have wings with size. So that is, I think, a valid question mark.
Well, you mentioned 2 guys I wanted to talk about. Let's start with Gigi. What sort of stood out to you the most about what he did for the Grizz last season?
The number of ways that he can score is incredible. And part of that is when you factor in his age. He was the youngest player in the NBA last year. Also, when you factor in his size, like 6'8", 6'9", the fact that he made threes, but also could create his own jump shot, and then he could get to the basket. I mean, I know it's summer league, but he had a play against the Pelicans in summer league this year. It was like a Euro step from half court, not in a transition opportunity. It was like into the game. I'm dribbling it out near half court. It was Ja Morant-esque, where it's like he picks up his dribble at the 3-point line and then Euros towards the bucket for just a layup. And you're like, who can do that? And not to be rhetorical, it's like, okay, Giannis can, LeBron can. It's like this list of guys, and you're like, and by the way, that guy is 19. He's still younger than everyone else he's playing in summer league. And so I think just the way he can score at every level, a lot of it was garbage time for the NBA season. Like, he scored 44 points in the last game of the regular season, but he did have some big games back when it sort of mattered. He had the big game on TNT. He had great games against the Warriors and Knicks. And it's like he was coming off the bench, and all of a sudden there's this 18-year-old who could score 20 points, who also has the athleticism and the size. We are like, whoa, that's prototypical. And so all of that, I think, is the most exciting stuff about Gigi right now.
And do you think what he does, and watching him, I would believe that it does, the way he scores like translates to play finishing, to where I don't worry about, well, how does Gigi Jackson fit if you're going to play him with Ja Morant and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. a ton of minutes? That just seems like something where even his full floor motor or willingness to like kind of move away from the ball, it feels like he should fit into their full strength. I hate that I have to use this caveat with this team every single time, but the full strength offense, it feels like he will be a pretty clean fit for.
I think so. The concern is, does he shoot too much? Like, the concern is, can he seamlessly fit into a lower usage role? That's going to be, I think, one of the big challenges for him. Like, they're going to ask him to, like, hey, buddy, we need you to defend and rebound. And that was the challenge they actually gave him at Summer League this year. They're like, we know you can score. We want you to defend and rebound. He did a great job rebounding in Summer League. He got a lot of offensive rebounds. And it's one of those things where when you watch Summer League, you're like, oh, that guy's getting a lot of offensive rebounds because he's just physically better and different and bigger than everyone else. And fair criticism, but also awesome criticism for a 19-year-old who's still younger than everybody in Summer League. We're like, yeah, Gigi Jackson looks physically different than everyone else out there. That's why he's averaging 3 offensive rebounds per game in Summer League. So I think he will accept the challenge. There were some clips of him on social media of just standing in the corner, like, which he's supposed to do. He's standing in the corner, spacing, and somebody was like, yeah, Gigi has to do this. They're asking him to go stand in the corner. And like, I believe he responded to it with something like, just play a role. I'll play my role. And that's, if he plays his role, yes, I do think the fit is seamless. It's another guy that the defense has to worry about, that has to honor his shot. Whether or not the shot is real, I think that's a question. His range is outrageous, but also he sometimes takes outrageous in a bad way shots where you're like, you shot that 6 feet behind the line. I don't know if that was your shot, sir. That's going to be the whole thing for this whole year, where it's like, guys, we have Zach Edey posting up whoever it is, inside. Like, and also, by the way, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane are on your team. So it's a good problem to have now for the Grizzlies, where you have guys who can score and getting them to fit in with the better players.
What stood out to you the most about Vince Williams, and why is it the flamboyance on his wrist whenever he throws a pass? I think it's my favorite. Every time I watch him throw a pass, it's like exaggerated, and I worry about his wrists and shoulders.
Do we have the tracking data that measures the speed of passes in the NBA?
Sure, teams do.
Not even joking. I texted people early on when Vince Williams Jr. started playing for the Grizzlies, when he finally got in the rotation. I was like, his passes move faster, right? Like, he whips those balls across the court. Like, I'm not even joking. I think Vince Williams Jr.'s passes move faster than most players. What stands out the most? He's awesome, Dan. He's incredible. I don't know if everybody out there has watched Vince Williams Jr. play. He is the best glue guy. I mean, maybe like Drew Holiday's the best glue guy, but he is, as far as a unspectacular under the radar, unknown guy. He's so good at defense. He had a stretch where it was like successive games. I'm forgetting because it's August and the season is so long ago. He had successive games where like he guarded Kevin Durant. He was the team's primary defender on Kevin Durant, and he did a passable job. And then he's guarding Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie Irving got a technical foul. He got so frustrated. He shoved him. And then like he's guarding, I can't remember the next one was. He's like guarding LeBron. He's having to guard. He guarded Steph Curry. There's a famous clip from last year. Actually, the NBA social team put it out earlier this week where it was like handles week in the NBA, and Steph Curry did this spectacular thing where he basically carried Vince Williams Jr. all around the court before making a layup. And it's like a big, spectacular Steph Curry play. Vince Williams Jr.'s defense on this play is so amazing. Like, yeah, Steph's going to beat you sometimes. But also in that clip, there's a photo of Vince Williams Jr. and he's just grinning ear to ear. The man might be a little bit off kilter. He's a tiny bit nuts. And like, he loves playing defense. He loves guarding the other guy. Also, so when you include that, you're like, whoa, this guy's a elite primary defender. This guy might be a better one-on-one defender on the perimeter than Marcus Smart. This guy might be our best perimeter defender. And then you add into that, this guy might be our best rebounder, period.
Which is wild. 6'4". And just, I looked, because you're a fellow stats guru. I looked this up for you. Of anyone who is 6'4" or shorter, and to have ever matched his block and steal rates in a single season, nobody has ever had as high of a defensive rebounding percentage as him.
That's what I'm talking about. It was a thing where it's like, you watch him, and I would say for a while there, I was like, you know, I get into the stats and I'm talking about the Grizzlies, and for a while there, we're bad at rebounding. It starts with Jaren, but like Dylan Brooks was a horrible rebounder. Desmond Bane is not a naturally good rebounder. Morant gets rebounds, but they're all the uncontested, just, you know, useless defensive rebounds. None of these guys have motors. And I remember being a thing where I'm like, guys, I think Luke Kennard per possession might be like our third best rebounder, you know, or something. But then Vince showed up, and there's no caveats. It's no longer like for guys 6'4" or smaller, or based on the number of minutes. It was just, no, he's our best rebounder. And there was a while there where he was leading the team in rebounds per game. It was like he's averaging like 6 per game. So, all right, he's the best perimeter defender on the team. He's the best rebounder on the team. He throws these fast passes. He's a useful playmaker. Like, he can actually pass. And like getting that, a guy who just passes, rebounds, and defends. And oh, by the way, he hit 37% of his threes last year. And it's like, this is made in a lab. If you need to have your fifth starter, the guy to fit alongside 2 all-stars and a near all-star shooter in Desmond Bane, Vince Williams Jr. is the guy. So I am over the moon with Vince Williams Jr. He also specifically fits the genre of player I enjoy the most, just like the hustle guy, the guy who's
all turned to 11 guy.
Yeah. Like fully turned up, but also getting steals, getting blocks. He also draws offensive fouls. Listen, I don't always love this. I think a lot of the NBA's offensive foul rules are wrong. But hey, it's a fallen world we live in, Dan. And he's just playing by the rules as written. There was a game, I think it was against the Pistons. He drew 4 away from the play offensive fouls, not charges. Just like, hey, I got Cade Cunningham to run into me and fell over. And maybe it's a dark art that Marcus Smart developed in him, but like, he picks up also these, just like, those are turnovers. He forces offensive fouls all the time. Like, you better set the best, most stationary screen around Vince Williams Jr., or he's going to get a foul called on you, because he's going to fall over. He's going to slip. He's going to throw his legs out. So yeah, I love Vince Williams Jr. I think he's incredible. And as we record on August 30th, Dan, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Vince. Just turned 24.
Oh, so he's like 10 years older than Gigi Jackson, though. So he's like,
that's right.
So
that's right.
What is, like, I guess, the area of development you'll be monitoring? I feel like the low-hanging fruit is probably the turnovers, which a lot of those happened where he didn't run in pure volume a ton of pick and rolls last year, but he did turn the ball over on 30% of his pick and rolls. And when you watch, it's kind of like you mentioned the hustle, that motor. It almost betrays him in those situations where things might need to slow down. And so to me, that feels like a low-hanging fruit area, but I'm talking myself out of my own suggestion is, well, does that matter as much when like John, Desmond Bane, and if Marcus Smart and all those guys are healthy, how much playmaking are the Grizzlies going to need to rely on him for?
Yeah, the weakest part of his game is the turnovers, and I do think a lot of it was him being asked to do too much. Like his handle is not there for a guy who maybe had the ball in his hands that much last year. There were several, like dribble off his foot situations. Also, like the weakness in his game and the reason he's not an all-star with all the stuff I was raving about, like his finishing, not great. Finishing off the dribble, not great. His shooting, he can't create his own shot. That's why he is going to be his whole career a lower usage guy. He's going to be a glue guy his whole career. Maybe the style of like a James Posey, like you hope maybe if the shooting keeps improving, he will rise to that level. But I'm less worried about the turnovers when he gets alongside a fully healthy team. But that is something I think he does need to work on. Continue working on the handle. Continue working on the shooting.
Because people like to rank things, though, I need you to rank who you're higher on long term, Gigi Jackson or Vince Williams. I think Vince Williams is better right now, but like Gigi Jackson has that youth appeal. He's only 14.
I mean, when you put it, who are you higher on? A safer bet for me is Vince, because like if the playoffs started now this week, I think Vince Williams Jr. can give useful minutes basically to every team in the NBA in the playoffs. I think he's a postseason player. I think he's that good. I think his defense plus rebounding plus hustle plus passing means he can play in a playoff rotation anywhere. Maybe not like on the Celtics or something, but like, I don't know, he'd be the 8th best guy in the Celtics. I'm pretty sure he's that good in my mind. Maybe I'm over my skis on him. He's that good. But like, who are you higher on? Gigi has the higher ceiling because the NBA is about scoring, and with his size, athleticism, the range he has on his jump shot, his ability to score, like those things are all tantalizing. Vince Williams Jr. is never going to be an all-star, and I don't think he has the potential to be an all-star. Gigi does have the potential to one day be an all-star. But to answer your question, I'll take Vince. Maybe I'm more of a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush. I'm like, this is here and now. It's here and real right now. I'll take it. But like Gigi's upside, it is so tantalizing. It's one of the reasons I don't think either of those guys are like, they're not movable. You're not going to trade either one of those guys. The team is so high on both of them.
They don't make enough to bring anyone back of consequence anyway. So that
exactly.
Would be... So this is, I know it could be ascribed to just the injuries, the availability, but the Grizzlies went from 6th in average offensive possession time in 22-23 to 23rd last year. Was there anything other than just the constant revolving door of lineups in there that contributed to that? And does this team even, we've talked about rebounding where we think Vince Williams is still their second best rebounder. Like, do they have enough of that rebounding juice to end possessions and then continue to get out in transition, or even hit the offensive glass hard enough to get back to some of their roots?
You say average possession time?
Yeah, so it's like it's not factoring in just transition. Like it'll Unpredictable has them, and I prefer it to. I mean, I like transition frequency, but I prefer it to pace, because pace to me is too dependent on the other team. And so if you're looking at the average offensive possession time, you can just see who in general is faster. Like even after makes. Like Indy will just run after makes anyway, and that data will let you see that a little bit better.
I mean, I think I'll be honest with the listener, not a stat I've ever followed.
It's the only stat that matters, though, Keith.
I mean, I like time of possession in a football game. Is this back to that time where they were like, did you know Klay Thompson only dribbled the ball 6 times in a 61 point? And I'm like, I didn't know we tracked. Does that matter? Who cares? Like 6 dribbles? It feels low, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, if you're worried about their half-court offense, I would say like the speed at which they're operating on offense does matter.
I would say very quite obviously, the way it translates to me, it's like this team was good in transition because they forced a bunch of turnovers and they had Ja Morant getting towards the basket immediately. With Desmond Bane, who also was good in transition, with Desmond Bane only playing, I think maybe 39 games, with no Ja Morant, all that is easily why they would dribble the ball up and be like, no one can get a shot. Let's dribble the ball for a few more seconds. So I don't I don't find myself worried about this stat I just found out about. Once the team,
I mean, more so the speed at which is the offense going to get back to its roots of like being able to capitalize on those faster paced?
Yeah, I think 100%. I mean, I think that you're going to have Edey getting those rebounds. You're going to get it to your ball handlers. They were one of the first teams that I think fully implemented. This was like 5 seasons ago. Fully implemented. Just get the ball across half court. I don't care who gets the rebound. Like this is not give it to Ja, pass it to the point guard. They are big on getting the defensive rebound and just going and pushing it up. And I think they're going to get back to that once they have more talent. I mean, we haven't talked about it, but like last year, they played 33 players. I think they had something like 20 players score 150 points for them, which seems impossible. Like they had 51 different starting lineups. So
that number still, whenever I see it, the 51.
Yeah, 51 different starting lineups. I don't think it matters. I don't think a lot of those stats matter. And I think once you get back to be it the more archaic pace or this newfangled average possession time, I think the Grizzlies are going to be getting good looks early in the shot clock a lot of the time once they get their guys back.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter portion of the podcast?
Yeah. Sure.
Are there any strengths or just elements of this team that we haven't discussed that you also just think they're not receiving enough attention on a national level?
I think on the national level, the thing we hit on early on about how the extra reps that Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. got as like the number one, like top on the scouting report for the other team on who they have to stop. I think putting those 2 guys alongside Ja Morant, it's going to be a handful. And I just think the depth the Grizzlies have right now, even if they've kind of punted on the last 5 men on their roster, like the depth is spectacular when you compare it to other teams. I feel like a lot of the other teams in the West, their depth has gotten worse. And you think about the Grizzlies being able to have Ja, Dez, and Jaren, and Zach Edey, and Marcus Smart, and also have Vince Williams Jr., also have Brandon Clark. We haven't mentioned Luke Kennard, still a very useful player. G.G. Jackson, if he does continue on this trajectory, this development path, like that is a really good top 9, even if you do have some question marks about their size, about maybe the overall fit. But I think there's enough good veteran players that they will figure it out. So I feel like the fact that the Grizzlies, having those 2 dominant regular seasons and now basically all the guys are back. Yeah, there are questions like, is Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr., and Zach Edey, is that better than Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, and Tyus Jones? Like that's kind of the trade-off there. But I think with the development you've seen from Ja and Dez and Jaren, this is going to be one of the better teams in the West. And I am a little bit quizzical when they aren't mentioned as such.
Aside from the health factor, what is the biggest concern you have for this roster?
I guess I would go back to that fit thing, just knowing like last year, I felt like that even when the guys were available that we knew were going to be available, it seemed like they were less than the sum of their parts. And that was very weird because the first 4 seasons under Taylor Jenkins, they always seemed more than the sum of their parts. It was just like, it doesn't matter who plays, the team is really, really good. And so maybe it was just an aberration from last year. They were horrible at home last year, which just felt strange. Like they couldn't win home games. They had some weird just shooting numbers, even when the team was healthy. And again, if it's 20 games, maybe the other team made too many threes. Your threes didn't go in. Maybe the question mark is the shooting. Like I know
I was gonna gobble up that low hanging fruit and just wonder if there was enough shooting on this.
Like
roster.
That is a concern. Unaddressed by the Luke Kennard signing. I mean, it's funny. I was a person who kept being like, I feel like they should move on from Luke Kennard or bring in a guy who's just going to play more minutes. Like obviously Luke Kennard's one of the best 3-point shooters in the world, but if the team's fully healthy, he's going to play like 10 minutes a game or 15 minutes a game. Cause I consider Vince Williams Jr. a guard. You have 4 better guards than Luke in Ja and Dez and Marcus Smart and Vince Williams Jr. So like, I feel like you need a 3 or a 4 who can make some threes. Now
by the way, that's the downside of I know they don't use it, but like, would you have rather had, if let's just say the tax was the hard line, like we're not going to go into this or stay into this. Would you rather have Luke Kennard, or like you could have given that same money? Like he ended up with what, 11 million, That's more than Simone Fontecchio got in Detroit. It's more than Najee Marshall got from Dallas. And now maybe those players didn't necessarily want to go there, but like those are two players who to me would have fit what the Grizzlies need. I mean, maybe Najee Marshall's not super high volume from three, but positionally feels like he fits more of what like Simone Fontecchio would have been perfect for this team.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. And that's one of the things where, you know, I don't think I finished this thought earlier as my brain led me astray. The dreams coming into the offseason was to get a starting center and then to get a 3/4 who could shoot and score. Cause it does seem like maybe Marcus Smart's best role is coming off the bench. I mean, maybe Vince Williams Jr. can fully handle being like the small forward, but like you said, he's 6'4". He's got a good wingspan, but all those guys are smaller. And like, you need guys to guard. If it's Luka or KD or Jason Tatum or whoever, like it seems like you need more size. I don't know if small ball, like Zach Edey and 4 guards might be a thing they run a lot, you know?
Ooh, sign me up for that.
It sounds fun on paper, and maybe that's the zag, you know, for, you know, the rest of the league doing one thing. Let's play small ball and have just a big center in there. I don't know, but it does seem like just getting, I mean, a guy I mentioned who seems like totally available. It's just like Dorian Finney-Smith, who on a bad team looks kind of horrible, but on a good team, he's just useful. He's a defender. He makes 34% of his threes. And that's kind of all I feel like the Grizzlies need. He didn't have to start even. And you mentioned like the Najee Marshalls or like, you know, whoever it is, even like I wanted PJ Washington at last year's trade deadline. The Mavs went out and
before the Pelicans got him, I wanted them to sign Javonte Green, another undersized.
Javonte Green is so old and it's fine, but like that's, you know, those are the kind of guys where it's like
you have a 13-year-old Gigi Jackson. You don't need to be concerned about it. I'm just going to continue to de-age him.
And maybe, and like the thing the front office has done. And so for several years as a podcaster about the Grizzlies, I go into the offseason and I'm like, we have the full mid-level exception. Here are the guys we could get. And then we don't get any of them. And then the next year I'm like, all right, we have the full mid-level exception. I really think we're going to sign one of these guys. And then we signed Derrick Rose. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of shocking because we actually had things we needed. I don't think maybe, I mean, some teams sign the OG guy, good for the locker room. How do I judge if it was good for the locker room in a year you lost 55 games? No idea. But this year, we clearly had room on the roster because like Yuta Watanabe did to the Grizzlies this massive solid and retired from the NBA. Like he had a player option. We were going to be up against the tax and it was like, all right, we got Yuta. We don't have any roster spots. And then it's like, he's going to move to Japan and leave the NBA. And that was like, whoa, he did us a solid. We have a roster spot we can work with now. Here's all the guys we can sign. But this year, I was not Charlie Brown going up to Lucy holding the football. I said, after I named all those names, just so you know, I probably wasted my breath. They're not going to sign. And like, they didn't sign anyone. And honestly, actually, they got me again. They Lucy with the football with me again. I'm like, they're really not going to sign anybody this year? And but again, the pushback or the thing you can say the front office has done, like they're using a roster spot on Jalen Wells. They brought in Cam Spencer to be the cheap Luke Kennard replacement eventually. He's on a 2-way. The thing they have done is they've carried young guys at the end of their roster. I think it hurt them in the season they lost to the Lakers in the playoffs. And I don't know what we say about last year. Maybe it didn't hurt them. But what that has done is that has allowed them to actually hit on like 1 out of 3 or 4 of those guys. Like you say, oh, they're still paying Kennedy Chandler. That's why we had to spend a 2nd-round pick to salary dump Zaire Williams and why we had to stretch Mamadi Diakite. But they picked Vince Williams Jr. at the end of the 2nd round. And now they have Vince Williams Jr. They picked Gigi Jackson with the 45th pick. And so maybe that's, you know, maybe this is one way to do it. You're going to strike out on several. Maybe you're not going to have the depth you absolutely need if you filled up the back end of your roster. If you paid for a Kelly Oubre or a Caleb Martin or a Jalen Smith or a Buddy Hield or a DeAnthony Melton or a Kyle Anderson, like those are the guys you could have signed. Maybe the bridges were burned with 2 of those names, but like you could have signed guys to come in and help you and to complement your squad. I tend to favor that approach. My thought was in 2020 2022, we're closer than we think. We don't know how long windows stay open. We should basically be all in for the next few seasons. And I don't understand restocking the back end of your roster with young guys who might not help you. But if like Jalen Wells or Cam Spencer becomes a useful NBA player, maybe that extends your title window. That's what they're banking on. And again, that's the generous reading of not spending money. I mean, my dream, in my mind, you could have your cake and eat it too. Mm-hmm. You could have done lots of these things. You could have kept Zaire Williams' salary. You had bird rights on Luke Kennard. You can pay him whatever you want. You could have picked up his expensive player option. Could have been way in the tax. Now, instead of sending the Nets Zaire and a second rounder for Diakite, who we're going to stretch, now maybe I can send the Nets Kennard's X amount of dollars, Zaire Williams X amount of dollars, and send him a first round pick in 2 seconds or something for Cam Johnson, or less than that for a Dorian Finney-Smith. I could still have guys I'm developing. I could go into the tax. Maybe we're going to stay away from the first apron, but like you could have matched the salaries to go over into the luxury tax. But I don't know if they will ever do that. Maybe they will when the right opportunity presents itself. Maybe they want to see how good Marcus Smart is this season. Maybe they want to see how it all works together, and then they'll try to cobble some salaries together. But one of the problems is when you're so focused on staying out of the tax, you lose those matching salaries. You lose those avenues where you could bring on more money. If once you lose that salary slot and you're over the cap, there's nothing really you can do. They do still have the MLE. They do still have a Steven Adams traded player exception. They can bring in some money going to the tax. Whether or not they will to improve this team, that's going to be a big question.
What does the top 10 rotation look like at full strength for this team?
Definitely presumed starters is John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, maybe Vince Williams Jr. starts, but who cares? So Vince, that's your top 6. Brandon Clark, and then I would say Santi Aldama, Luke Kennard. Did I do enough? Let's see. Maybe Gigi's your 10th man. Yeah, so I guess Gigi's your 10th man. The one question I have also, we forget this or we ignore this as Grizzlies fans. The Grizzlies had like one fully healthy game last year. One. Where everyone was here. Where like Luke Kennard was available. And they got annihilated. They lost by like 30 at home to the Kings. That doesn't matter. Yeah, the Kings, good team. Things happen. But in that game, like Derrick Rose played a lot of minutes. And that was like hey, why is Derrick Rose playing when fully healthy? Like when we do the depth chart, I think it makes sense to just have like your second unit is Luke Kennard and Vince. Those guys could dribble. And then Gigi, Santi, and Brandon, and maybe you don't play all 5 of those bench guys at the same time. Maybe, the way they do it, they stagger Ja and Dez. So like Dez will be the ball handler for the second unit along Luke and Vince. That's plenty of ball handling, but that is, I think, your top 10. Apologies to Jake LaRavia stands and apologies to Derrick Rose.
So obviously this will be to some extent matchup dependent, but what do you think winds up being their most used crunch time unit?
I have no idea. I mean, that's one of the fun things where does Zach Edey close games? I don't know. I would guess Brandon Clark is your 4-5. And then I would guess it's John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. I would guess that's your closing 5. And like, I get excited thinking about that, frankly. I mean, I not a lot of teams can put 5 better guys on the court at the same time. Does Vince Williams Jr. step into that lineup sometimes for Brandon Clark? You're a little bit small there, but like, I mean, good luck scoring on that. And maybe Marcus sometimes isn't closing. I mean, it's going to be, it
feels like there are just 3, you would say 3 locks for the crunch time unit, and then there might be some finagling from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously Ja, Dez, and Jaren are going to play when they're available. And then I would say Marcus Smart, Zach Edey, Vince Williams Jr., and Brandon Clark would be the other 4 guys you're picking for the final 2 spots.
Is there a funky, weird, offbeat lineup you would like to see them try?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give me, like, I might even do one without Ja. Like Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Vince Williams Jr. have to play together. Like that has to play together. And give me that with Desmond Bane. And then I'm deciding who my other, like maybe a Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr., Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr. That's it. Get out of town. That's gonna have a 75 defensive rating right there. It's gonna be unstoppable. They'll score now. I think you got Dez and Jaren to score. That one I'm calling it now. Cleaning the glass. That's a plus 20 net rating. No problem.
I'd like to see them throw out like the 5 guard lineup.
Yeah.
Marcus Smart and Vince Williams just defend up like they always do. You have those two, Desmond Bane, John Morant, and then I don't consider him a guard, but I can't say the wing lineup because the Grizzlies don't have enough of those. But let's throw GG Jackson in there for good measure. Keith, what's the average offensive possession time for that unit if they're on the court together?
What is this measured in? Seconds? You said guards. I was thinking Ja Morant, Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, Vince Williams Jr., Marcus Smart. Marcus at the 5?
Yeah, I think I'd just rather see Gigi. I know Luke Kennard.
All right, Gigi's taller.
Yeah.
Okay. They have so many options. They're reminiscent. If you did something like Ja, Luke, and Dez together, Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane together, those 3, their lifetime, I believe, net rating is somewhere in the plus 45 per 100 possessions. That was regular season and playoffs combined. Those 3 are a big reason, or that number I think is a big reason why they're like, we're keeping Luke Kennard no matter what. And so like if those 3 play together, if you have like Marcus Smart at the 4, Jared at the 5, that's reminiscent of like those early 90s Suns teams. Okay. They had like Kevin Johnson, they had like Rex Chapman playing the 4. It was like Kevin Johnson, Rex Chapman, Steve Nash, Wes Person maybe was playing the 4. It's similar to that, where I feel like they have a lot of small ball things they can try. Whether or not they score enough, because like whether they score enough to make up for the fact they'll have like maybe a 120 defensive rating, who knows?
Okay, as we record this on August the 30th, their over-under is at 47.5. Are you taking the over, the under, and where do you see them stacking up relative to the rest of the West?
That's a real good number. I think the West is going to be so hard. I'm going to probably end up taking unders for most teams, just because unders normally hit more because they're bet less. Also, with 13 teams, probably pretty good. And then the Jazz, who are going to probably win games in November and December. It's hard. I do think personally, as far as like a power rankings, I'd put the Grizzlies as like maybe I think I'm so sick of saying when healthy, but if healthy, I think they're like the 3rd or 4th best team in the West. They're definitely, I think, in that tier alongside, like I have them trailing the Thunder. I think the Timberwolves are better until proven otherwise. I think the Nuggets are better until proven otherwise, but like, I'm not that scared of the Nuggets anymore.
You shouldn't be, but
yeah, like I'm scared of Jokic, but like,
I think it's fair to say that 3 of the 4 teams between Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, and OKC will probably be better than them. But to just say that the Grizzlies wouldn't be in the top 4 if they're going to be healthy just goes a bridge. I think they're firmly in the top 6, though. I don't view them as like getting in by way of the play-in.
Yeah. Like Luka never loses to Ja Morant, so that's a problem for us. He's something like 10-1 lifetime against Ja Morant, but his winning percentage is much worse against Vince Williams Jr. So like they're definitely in my mind. Like I don't look at any team in the West like the Mavericks and the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, and I'm like, whoa, they are head and shoulders above us. Maybe I will once the season starts, and I'm like, guys, we're still giving up like a 28% offensive rebound rate. Like I thought we were going to clean the glass a little bit better. So maybe I'll change my tune once I see it all together. But I do think, top 6 in the West is clearly where they should be. Whether or not that translates to the wins, I'd probably take the over, but like winning 50 games is going to be a lot for any team in the West. And I think there's going to be this huge clump next year of like there are 9 teams between 45 and 51 wins. You know, like I think that's what's going to be. And taking the over on that, it's kind of a coin flip. So I'm kind of weaseling out. I'll say over. I think my team's amazing. I have them a slide over at 48 wins.
They lost 15 pounds of weight, body fat, but they gained muscle. Yeah, that's tis the season. Exactly. Keith, this was great as always. Are you able very quickly just to tell our listeners where they can find you and all your work?
Yeah, Grizzlies fans or anybody who wants to know about the Grizzlies, listen to Grits and Grinds. Go subscribe on YouTube. Also subscribe to the Fast Break Breakfast podcast where Dave DeFore and I cover the whole league.
Thanks so much, Keith. I will talk to you soon.